Hello, friends, and welcome to Syracuse Sports. And I'm saying this quieter because it's Masters Week. And if I begin the show with hello, friends, we have to give a nice tribute to Jim Nance at Augusta saying hello, friends. Chris Carlson, Brent Autry here. We are not going to talk about Rory McIlroy's chances to win the Masters, though that would be nice. We are going to talk the latest in Syracuse sports with you. Every Thursday, we like to hit the live button and just kind of jibber jabber about the latest in Syracuse sports. We've got spring football issues to discuss, including the offensive line. Like, we sure we're okay with this offensive line and what's going on there heading into the spring game. The portal activities from Adrian Autry and company in basketball, and maybe what's left to do there, but what they have done to this point. And a big lacrosse game that not a lot of people can see unless they want to fork over $20 this weekend to watch a top 4 Syracuse Cornell lacrosse game. And our Syracuse Sports Insiders have a few things to say as well. We will hear from them coming up. It's right there on your screen on how you could become a Syracuse Sports Insider by texting us directly, by signing up at joinsubtext.com/Syracuse Sports, where it's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider to get direct text message access to us anytime for the latest news, opinions, analysis on all things Syracuse sports, breaking news first, and your ability to get your voice heard on this podcast exclusively. So I would like to bring in the award-winning Chris Carlson, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Oh, wow. What an
How about
introduction.
that? What a title you got now, buddy. Chris won the APSE award for best long feature, and I'm sure our audience is like, what the heck is that, right? But yeah, I assure you, in our business, it's a pretty big deal, but we care about it. It's a big deal. So congratulations to you, sir, and welcome here. We've got some fun things to discuss today.
Thank you. I can only hope that my voice is as soothing as to our listeners as yours was during that introduction. That was
I've got that piano in my head.
Very classic.
I've got all weekend. I'm just gonna have do 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 do. I mean the epic golf nap that will happen this weekend, and I'm all in. Masters Week is the best. I am all in. I cannot wait. So, Chris, we start though with some football. Mm-hmm. We have been to pretty much every spring practice so far, and I have to say one of our favorite coaches to talk to is Dale Williams, the offensive line coach. He's the best. He's very outspoken. He's very opinionated. He answers your questions, and he gives a very good perspective on what's out there, right? And I like how he responds to questions. Like I asked him a question yesterday about how he's been shuffling the offensive line. He kind of looks over there. He says, "Oh, you've been to more than one practice, huh?" So it's just it's good to have a coaching staff that has been transparent. And to Fran Brown's credit, he has been very transparent in the spring ball. We're going to pick a quarterback. He picks a quarterback. We asked him about David Wollaball, who we'll discuss here shortly, and he tells us the story of what's going on there. Demetrius Samuel Jr., oh yeah, he's on track to be the starting cornerback next year. Like, Fran doesn't play by the usual cloak and dagger rules that football coaches do. But this is my long-winded way of getting to the offensive line, and I want to turn to you because you wrote about this today based on what Dale Williams said last night. So we know what the starting 5 will be for the spring game, but do we really know what this offensive line's all about right now, I guess is the question.
You know, I think Fran Brown, right, we've given him credit for honesty, and he talked about being comfortable going 3 deep on the offensive line and building depth. And I think that's true, right? The number of, like, pretty good guys that you wouldn't be like, oh, no, like we're in trouble if this guy goes in the game. That number of guys has grown. He's grown that number of guys. But, you know, I don't think that they have a great idea if they know who the center is, right? But by all accounts, like, it seemed to us from watching practice and looking how guys were lined up, and Fran cautioned us a little bit against doing it that way. And Shane Beamer went on a rant that none of you guys know. You can't tell anything from that. But, like, you know, when it's all the first string guys and then like one guy we're uncertain about lined up, like, it's probably the first string offensive line. So yeah. Dave Wollaball seemed like he was probably the first string center for most of what we watched. He decides to leave the team. You know, they're moving over Mark Petrie, at least for the spring. And, like, he's a good guard, but like there are parts of center that are like, can he snap? Right? Like we've seen guys that just struggle to snap the ball. He won't have a lot of time having done that before we reach fall. Now, I trust Fran Brown that if he's worried about it, he's going to go in the portal and he's going to get a guy. Like I think this coaching staff has sort of proven that. But I don't think we know where they're at center. And, the same thing I think applies at left tackle. Like that, Travion Mack is the guy that was really like, he played 12 snaps on offense last year. He wasn't really on any of our radars. And like, now, I know it's not settled, but he's your first string blindside tackle. That is certainly risky.
These are important positions for a new quarterback who we know is Ricky Collins Jr. And again, I give Fran all the credit in the world for not messing around. You got to know who your quarterback is, and there's no use going through all of spring and most of fall camp and whatever happens in the summer. Of course, the coaches can't work directly with players throughout the summer, but you got to know who your leader is. You got to know we learned anything from Kyle McCord last year, who was a unicorn in a lot of ways, but you got to know who your quarterback is. And if you know, you know. So I give them credit for that. But you just said it, Chris. Now, what I like about Travion Mack is he's 6'6", 310. Okay, this is a guy that's getting bigger, natural left tackle in a lot of ways, but like you said, there's an experience there. Center is a very important position. You're snapping the ball, you're calling out defenses, you are engineering the offense for the quarterback. And to have somebody in Mark Petrie who has just moved over to that position, that's going to take time and reps to get used to. Woolabaugh, now David Woolabaugh's father was an excellent center and certainly would have been a great tutor for him to learn the ins and outs of it. But as you mentioned, as Fran Brown was transparent about earlier this week, he's going to hit the portal and look for an opportunity elsewhere. So we'll see what's in the portal. It's a very short spring portal window upcoming here. And what Dale Williams has done, and something that Joe Cruz told you, is that the more positions you can play, the better, because Dale wants the 5 best out there regardless of position, right? He wants you to know how to play left and right tackle, left and right guard. And hey, if you can snap the ball and play center a little bit, all the better. Yep. So it's intriguing, Chris, because they're saying we need you to be ready to come in at any time in any position, which is good because you need that. And they like to rotate 6 or 7 guys on the line anyway. But it just puts a little more tension on it when you're not quite sure of what it is and you have a new quarterback behind center.
Yeah, it is, right? Like I think it is I find this fascinating, right? He's like, I rank every offensive lineman from 1 to the bottom, and I ask them, where you think you rank? And then I tell them where they rank, and I say, right. I'm the coach, so I'm right. So that you can always have that top 5 in there. Demetrius Weatherspoon is a guy that helps with that. When Fran was talking about him, he's like, he can play tackle, he can play guard. So like right. If you're number 6, if someone gets hurt and your number 6 guy is a tackle, well, Demetrius Weatherspoon can move into guard and I'll bring my tackle in there. And the opposite approach works. I think that's really smart. I am curious, right? Enrique Cruz, we've heard good things about Naquil Bertrand as well. Mm-hmm. Over the offseason. So those are guys, in addition to Travion Mack, who can play tackle. It does seem like maybe you'd want to bring somebody at one of those positions that has a little bit more experience in, just to see. Like that seems like a place where maybe you try to find somebody in the spring.
And then, of course, there's Big Byron Washington, but he's a freshman who comes in at 6'7", 380. They want him to lose weight. He's doing everything he can to do that, to get acclimated with the offense, but not everybody on this roster can be a Demetrius Samuel Jr., Chris, who we've talked a lot about, and is going to play both ways and is just ready to make an impact instantly. If anything, the hardest position to get on the field and excel at, is offensive line, because there's just so much you have to get used to, and the speed of the game and all those things that a freshman is acclimating to. So it's good that Byron came into spring ball and have more time for that, but he's been rotating in as well. So that's where it goes back to what you said a minute ago about Fran Brown's confidence that they do have depth top to bottom, which is good, but offensive lines need reps together. They need to be in sync, and there's just a lot of moving parts here. But I don't know if they have like a top line guy, right? Like right. There's no like left tackle that you're like,
you're going to take care of your guy, and we don't have to even think about helping on that side. Like, I don't know if they have a tackle like that.
So, to Dale Williams' credit, he did tell us what the offensive line will be in the spring game. And if you're going to be at the spring game on Saturday at the Dome, and just for our viewers and listeners that don't know, there is not a live stream of the spring game this year. So Syracuse was given some options by the ACC network, who said, we can do three things for you. One of three things. We can stream the game on ACC Network Extra. We can give you an all-access show, a 1-hour all-access show, which incorporates all of spring ball, including the spring game, which will be repeated a number of times on the ACC network. Or they could basically stop by a practice and do a 30-minute studio show from the spring. So, Chris, I have to say, I didn't even mean to bring this up as a topic, but briefly, I think Syracuse picked the best option. I know some of you are going to want to watch the spring game, but an all-access show in this day and age, when people are very used to kind of the Netflixing of sports and those documentaries that are out there and the storytelling that comes with that, I think that's the better option for Syracuse, right? But just so you guys know, there is no live video stream of the spring game. So if you want to watch the spring game in its entirety, like, you got to be at the Dome on Saturday. And remember, you have to get a ticket for that. It's free and free parking, but you do have to claim a ticket first online before you go.
And we will have live updates on syracuse.com.
That's
if you
correct.
Are inclined to follow from home.
And our Syracuse Sports Insiders will keep you up to date. But what I meant to say, that's my long-winded way of saying, Chris, however you watch this game, the offensive line is probably going to be the most intriguing thing to keep an eye on.
I think so. The linebackers are interesting to me as well. And, the backup safeties are curious because they're names that we haven't really talked about a lot, just because, Devin Grant, Deuce Chestnut, Justin Barron, Barry Buxton, like, those guys were very reliable last year. And we know who the starting three are, but I don't know a whole lot about the backups there. So that's another place that I'm curious.
And of course, Samuel's going to get out there and we'll get some attention, and getting a first look at Ricky Collins is going to be all intriguing for sure. But football, it often comes back to that offensive line, which right now going into the spring game is, we mentioned a couple of these names, but just to go left to right, left tackle Travion Mack, left guard Josh Miller, remember, who was a transfer last year, who came in from Georgia. Mark Petrie at center, with David Wollabaugh now likely going in the portal, as Fran Brown noted. Joe Cruz at right guard, and Weatherspoon, Big Spoon as they call him, at right tackle. So that's your offensive line as of now. One of the intriguing things to keep an eye on.
And, I know you mentioned him. You've mentioned him a lot the past few weeks. Byron Washington is interesting because, like, when we watch one-on-ones, nobody's moving him. You can't get around him.
You can't, yeah.
But, like, he's also not, at this point, mobile enough to really pull. Like if he has to get out to sort of slant, if he has to move, there's going to be some struggles there. So, that's why he has to lose the weight. But it will be very interesting to, like, see him in a 5-on-5 setting, and whether he's dominant or whether he struggles. That will be pretty. I'll be curious.
So Chris brought it up. We'll have live updates on syracuse.com on Saturday. I'll be texting you guys throughout the day on our Syracuse Sports Insider text line. If you are at the Dome Saturday, say hello, send a text. Hey, I'm over here having a beer at Mirren Victory Court, or I'm outside tailgating. We'll come find you. Say hello. Would love to say hello and talk some ball with some of our listeners and viewers at our Syracuse Sports Insiders. So if you're going to be at the Dome on Saturday or outside on the quad enjoying all the festivities, which go on pretty much all day, we'd love to come over and say hello. Moving on to basketball, Chris. There are two things I really like about what Adrian Autry has done in the portal, and they are not done. They still have some additions to be made here, but I think they have earned the right to at least take somewhat of an exhale here, because they have brought in 4 players that are all going to play key roles on this team next year. But there's two things I really like about the 4 players that Syracuse has brought in. One is
you're giving Ibrahim Sore. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I should ask Mike Waters.
You nailed it, by the way. Nailed it.
I did. All right. You're giving him a key role already.
That's a fair point. I don't know if he'll have a key role, but he's going to have a role. Okay. He was a key addition because they need depth at that position. How about that? That's a better way to frame it. That's why you're an award winner, because you think of things like that. But I do like two things about these guys, Chris. One, they're all brand names. And I mean that by technically Oregon State's not in a Power 5 conference anymore, but that's not their fault. That's not Nate King's fault, the player they brought in from Oregon State. But you're talking about Georgia Tech, UCLA, Oregon State.
Yep.
I like that better than Delaware, Georgia State, and Hofstra, which, and Eddie Lampkin came from Colorado, to be fair. He did have a Power 5 talent that came in last year. The second thing I really like about these players that they have brought in, Nate George, Ibrahim, Nate Kings, and who's the fourth I'm forgetting here?
Ibrahim Soray.
You just brought him up, Ibrahim Soray. And William Kyle III from UCLA. I was forgetting him as well.
Sorry.
They all have, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, most of them have, if not all of them, have multiple years of eligibility left. Mm-hmm. Whereas all the guys you brought in last year were all one and dones. Which there's a method to that madness. You thought you bring in a lot of experienced players and you can make a run at it. And the way of the portal is you just restock them the next year. But I think they learned that now we need guys that have multiple years of eligibility left. And it's an interesting choice to be made because you're looking at a coach who is, to me, on the hot seat to at least make the tournament, right?
Yep.
But the benefit, Chris, is you could just go back in the portal, right? What do you have to lose if you're any of these players and let's say things do not work out? You just go back in the portal and somebody will pick you up, right?
You don't have to worry about that anymore if you're
exactly.
a player. You don't.
Exactly.
But you're right. Like the best teams, and I think Syracuse certainly has to win with continuity, right? Like Syracuse is probably not. I know they've improved their NIL realities, but they are probably not going to go out and buy an all-star team every year where you're going to be the transfer portal all-stars. They probably need to really maximize the sum of their parts, and you are going to have some continuity to be able to do that. I agree with you that I like what they've done so far. I agree with you that they can exhale a little bit. They are lacking sort of an offensive presence at center. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're going to find that guy because of how expensive centers are. But if you are going to go without a thing in basketball, like that seems like the thing that you can live without. You can live with a rim running center as long as your centers can defend. Syracuse's system, for which, we have our thoughts about the offensive system and the reliance on like the high pick and roll, but like the centers don't have to be incredibly offensively skilled to be out there setting screens. So it does seem like there's a method to the madness, right? In terms of how the roster is coming together, even if it might not be as perfect as you would like.
There is a method to the madness. And what I like about this is, and I'm going to try something on the fly here, Chris. I cut up a clip from shameless plug. I did another podcast, which is available now on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get Syracuse sports. So I did kind of a roundtable of writers that have covered these guys.
Okay.
Beat reporters from Georgia Tech, from UCLA and Oregon State, to give you a sense of, okay, they have seen these players up close and personal here. And one thing that stood out to me in talking about Nate George in particular is he's kind of a system guy. You brought up Autry's system. All right, so let me see if this clip works. I just uploaded a clip this is Chad Bishop. Chad is the beat reporter for Georgia Tech for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I thought this was interesting what he said about Nate George. Let me see if this works.
In football, right, we talk about a system quarterback. Is a kid successful because he's in a certain system? And Nate George was definitely in a system, right? This pick and roll system that Damon Stoudemire loves to run. And when it's working, it's really, really good. And Nate George did an awesome job running that show and really developed into that system of learning where center Bayandongo was, learning where his forwards were, and then kicking the ball out on the perimeter. So will he be able to translate that game into whatever Syracuse offense likes to run for Nate, right? Will he be able to sort of adapt, or will Syracuse adapt to what's best for Nate George? I mean, he's a kid that can handle the ball extremely well, has a great vision. I can't tell you how many times he's made a great pass and his teammate has dropped the ball or let it roll out of bounds because they weren't ready for it, that style of passer. He can certainly hit the three. He can have a complete game. I mean, almost had a triple-double at the ACC tournament this past year. That all that to say is he has some work to do defensively. He's not going to be your shutdown defensive point guard yet. Now, can he be that? Of course, if he develops and works on that part of his game and really gets into the gym to be that guy, that can certainly happen. But he's not there yet.
So thank you, Chad, for that. And how about that production on the fly? I'm glad that clip worked. But it was interesting to hear him say that comes from a system, work with Stoudemire. So how much will Autry and this coaching staff recognize that and mold what they're doing with the offense around him, much like Jeff Nixon now is to mold his offense and football around the talents of Ricky Collins Jr. versus Kyle McCourt? Well,
from the sounds of it, and my experience with Georgia Tech was limited mostly to watching them play Syracuse last year. But it sounds like the systems are probably have some similarities to start with in terms of what Nate George will be asked to do. So that sounds like a good starting point. They got to get better on defense. It sounds like he's not an automatic plus there, but it also isn't going to take a whole lot for Syracuse to get better on defense.
An interesting thing I saw this week too, Chris, basketball-wise, because, of course, you're adding these guys into Kiyan Anthony, Sadiq White, Aaron Womack, Luke Fennell, your recruits, your traditional recruits that are coming in the class of 2025. Kiyan said this week that Carmelo Anthony, now Hall of Famer Carmelo Anthony, congratulations to him once again. How is it that he – how cool – what I should say is how cool is it? Carmelo is a Hall of Famer twice on his own, and they inducted the 2008 Olympic team as well. So then Jim Boeheim gets in a second time. Nice how that works in a sense, right?
Yep.
So Hall of Famer Carmelo Anthony is going to be, according to Kiyan, at pretty much all of his games next year. I'm sure there'll be a conflict or two that pops up. And look, Chris, it's obvious, but this is smart, okay? Because Syracuse had, and I wrote this story, you guys can go check it out, one of its lowest attendance rates in JMA/Carrier Dome history last year. So you got to do all you can to build the buzz back up in that building. And let's be honest here. If you know that Carmelo Anthony is going to have a visible presence, now it depends on where he is. I don't know if he's up in a suite somewhere or whatever the case may be. But people love to star watch. And there's no bigger star in the Syracuse basketball universe than Carmelo Anthony. So if I just kind of show up on a random Wednesday to watch Syracuse play Cornell, let alone the big games, that Carmelo's going to be there. It can't hurt. Can't hurt the juice and the buzz, and maybe Carmelo brings some friends. I talked to Lala Anthony on this podcast. Maybe she brings some friends. They go to the Adam Weitzman school of let's bring some friends to the game. And there's Carmelo, and oh, hey, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but here's my friend Chris Paul. Here's my friend Chris Bosh. I don't think LeBron James would come to a Syracuse game, though they're friends, but who knows what the possibilities are here. So this is what you get with Kiyan, not just the player. You get the whole package here. And let's face it, that place could use some buzz. So I think this is a smart strategy for them to be there as often as they will be, not only for that aspect, but of course to watch their son play basketball as well.
I hope we get Carmelo courtside somewhere where we get the chance for like that Eddie Lampkin Melo high five at MSG last year. I want that in the dome on like a regular basis where we
need a Spike Lee courtside.
Melo is integrated into the whole experience. That would be fun.
Yes, that's exactly what that place needs, and it looks like we're going to get it next year. So get ready, kids. Going to be one way or the other. It's going to be a lot of intrigue and a lot of buzz from that aspect, and what they have done in the portal thus far, I think we'll see how it plays out, because you can give an average chef better ingredients. Doesn't mean he's going to make you a great meal. Autry's got to prove he has been given better ingredients and he can cook a better meal than the one with the ingredients he was given last year. And Alex Klein, I think, deserves some kudos for having a plan, executing the plan, knowing where to go. And they're not done. Like we said, they still need to add another player or two here, and we'll see how it all rounds out. But they get a pretty good grade. I guess there's a question we should ask on a podcast like this, Chris. If you had to give them a grade so far, what would it be? I would give them based on their needs and all things included, I'd give them a solid B+ so far.
Yeah, B+. That's what I would say too. I mean, it's tough without knowing what their budget is and what everybody else's budget is. That's the real. Right. It's impossible without knowing that. But, They've covered all their needs. They, it seems like everything fits together. Unlike last year, where it was like, okay, we're going to run this up-tempo system, but we're going to have a center who has, struggles to maybe get up and down the floor a little bit. That didn't quite fit. So yeah, that sounds like a fair grade to me.
Couple more things, Chris, before we get to some comments from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. So I need Memorial Day Chris on this for a minute here. And
he got stuck watching the Hall of Fame duties, and he did not deliver as promised and watch Syracuse.
That was the tailor-made Memorial Day Chris game.
I know,
Syracuse Notre Dame.
I talked about it at the start of the year. That was when I was going to watch, and duty calls.
Carmelo had to go in the Hall of Fame on the same day. That was the biggest win in the Gary Gate era, like by far. They shut out Notre Dame for 40 minutes, which is incredible to think about. One of the great defensive performances we have seen. One of our insiders notes it here is and shout out to Glenn, who says, does Jimmy McCool not have the greatest name ever?
Even I know
it's right
that.
up there.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's no Ruben Boomshay, but it's up there. All right. Jimmy McCool was unbelievable in that game. Joey Spallina found a way to spring free, score 4 goals. So your reward for beating Notre Dame, biggest win you've had, is #1 Cornell this week. Now, this is where Memorial Day Chris really comes in here. So let's say you're a Memorial Day Chris. You're just somebody who just follows Syracuse lacrosse passively. You just, when the buzz builds, they're pretty good. I should probably watch the game this weekend, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I do.
Well, that's where it gets a little complicated. One of the best college lacrosse games of the year. One of the biggest games Syracuse has played. I know Notre Dame was big, but this is the #1 team in the country, and they have the best player in the country, C.J. Kirst. And if Syracuse wins this game, they are all of a sudden thrust into the conversation as a legit national championship contender this year. Okay? Mm-hmm. The stakes get higher. Well, you can only find this game on a streaming service called Corrigan Sports Network. So I'm going to give you a quick background on this.
How do you spell
Corrigan? Corrigan.
Okay. Bad sign when that's a question.
Bad sign when you got to ask me how to spell it and what it is. Okay. So quick background. Corrigan Sports is a company that puts on a number of events. They do lacrosse events. They actually do some distance running events. They've done this with Syracuse the past couple of years. So Syracuse played a game in Virginia last year against Delaware. That was a Corrigan Sports event, which you could only stream as well on a service called Flow Sports, which don't get me going about them either. Okay. Year before that, Syracuse played North Carolina in a Corrigan Sports event that was at, again, a neutral site. Okay. Mm-hmm. Gary Gate once a year likes to play games on a neutral site. It's good for recruiting. At least that's his justification for this. Okay. This year, Syracuse Cornell, the first time, Chris, in 110 years of this rivalry, that they're going to play on a neutral site. This has never happened before. It's usually been either in Ithaca or Syracuse. Last year, Syracuse Cornell was one of the greatest lacrosse games I've ever seen in my life. Syracuse lost in double overtime, but it was an amazing game. Mm-hmm. There is a rivalry here. There's a history here. You have a fan base that's starting to catch on that this team's pretty good. So in order to see this game, you have 2 options. You can go to Mitchell Field in Uniondale, Long Island, where this game is taking place near Nassau Community College, or you could pay Corrigan Sports Network $20 to watch this game.
$20. That is steep. That is steep for lacrosse.
Chris, when I pay Netflix my $20-ish a month,
you get the month.
I get the month. And I couldn't watch everything in that month on Netflix if that's all I did for a month. Same thing with Hulu. Same thing with a lot of these streaming services. ESPN Plus, I pay $10 a month for it. I also get Hulu and Disney Plus in addition to that, right? Hours of entertainment. If you're going to ask me to pay $20 for a lacrosse game, I better be at that lacrosse game.
Yeah, casual Chris isn't signing up for this.
Casual Chris and casual everybody out there isn't signing up for this. So I don't get, and I want to be fair about this, okay? The thing I'm going to do when we're done with this podcast is I'm going to go to the Syracuse lacrosse availability, and I'm going to ask Irrigate this question, but how does this benefit you to have a top 5 game, which it turned into? Nobody knew when they made this deal 6 months ago that it was going to be a top 5 game, but we knew it would have some juice around it. And to be fair, remember, April 12th was supposed to be the day after the Billy Joel concert.
Yep.
So in their eyes, the Dome was not available.
Right. The spring game
easier.
wasn't going to be able to be played there because of the
Correct.
concert.
So it's easier for the spring football game to move back in the Dome because they're right there. They made this deal with this company. You can't back out of it now. So this is all great for Corrigan sports and good for them. This is America, and they made a deal. But to be a lacrosse fan, whether it's Memorial Day Chris or a passionate fan, and my only option to watch this game if I don't go to it is to pay $20 to a streaming service. Again, I just don't see how this benefits everybody. It benefits Corrigan sports, good for them, but everybody else that wants to see a marquee game here, you're putting them at a disadvantage. And I don't understand the recruiting benefits of this because you already recruit Long Island.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get in front of 6,000 fans at this game or so, which is great. And for some of the players from Long Island, it's a homecoming. Good for them. But you want to play on Long Island, schedule Hofstra or something.
Sure. Yeah.
This, to me, in so many ways, just does not benefit everybody. And it happened to become one of the top 5 games of the year. So I don't know. This whole thing just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. No, I get it. That sounds, I'll see it for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, we'll see Memorial Day Chris in about a month.
Yeah, I'm like the groundhog. I'm going back in my hole. I didn't see a lacrosse game. I didn't see a lacrosse game on TV. It wasn't on my TV, so I'm going back. And I'll see you in May.
I'll see you in 6 weeks. Fantastic. All right. So, old man on porch yelling at cloud. Don't make me pay $20 to watch this game. But trust me, when Saturday comes and my phone's lighting up because people are like, what channel is the game on? And I have to explain what this is. I'm not going to be a happy camper. And it's at the same time as the spring football game as well. So there's just a lot of things that didn't work out here that I wish, we had more of an opportunity to work this out. But okay, we'll see. We'll see if, we'll have live updates on syracuse.com. We'll keep you updated. It's not like you're not going to know what's going on. But if you actually want to sit down and watch this thing, it's a little more involved than it should be. That's my only complaint.
Good for our business. We'll charge you less than $20 a month for your subscription, and
exactly.
you can follow along with us, and you can have all of our content for the rest of the year too. So we sound like a much better deal than Corrigan sports.
That's right.
Not to be a shill, but that just seems like common sense to me.
We got you covered. All right, here's what our Syracuse Sports Insiders have to say. And at $3.99 a month, that's a hell of a deal as well. Patrick D. He's going back to hoops, Chris. He says, this team lacks a defensive identity. I'm encouraged that some of the players that Syracuse is picking up in the portal are good defenders. But what is the defensive identity or culture at Syracuse? And he adds this. If they can develop a really, really strong defense, I think they'll have a chance. But what do I know? I only came in second in our Syracuse Sports Insider Bracket Challenge. I love that Patrick's just dropping the hammer there.
Wow. A little humble brag.
I did finish second. Yeah, exactly. Why humble brag about that, my man? But he does bring up a good point, and you touched on it earlier. Nate George, we're not sure about his defense. William Kyle can block shots, but is he a consistent 20 to 24-minute guy on defense? Soiree, we're still trying to figure that out. And Nate George, we have to see how good of a defender he is, not to mention you got some freshmen coming in now. Sadiq White, for a freshman, is an established shot blocker.
Has a reputation for wanting to play to play good defense.
But it's a fair question from Patrick. Like, what you still have to address the biggest elephant in the room with this team, which they were terrible on defense.
They want to pressure the ball, and they need and if you're going to do that, you need shot blockers in the back. So, again, that was like a bad fit, right? If you want to try to pressure the ball, like, you can't have Eddie Lampkin in the back. Like that just doesn't fit. Now, there were a lot of problems with pressuring the ball last year, where I'm not going to tell you that the system is perfect, but like that does seem to be what they want to do. And they certainly have the pieces to be at least better at it this year than they were last year, but they have to be much better.
And a lacrosse comment from our friend Rock and Ron here, who was Memorial Day Chris once upon a time, but he is becoming more and more of a lacrosse fan.
He says, I can be as cool as Rock and Ron when I get older. So that gives me hope.
He says, do you think Coach Gate will be playing Anderson a little more? That is one big body for lacrosse. I feel he was the spark that Syracuse needed. So who he's talking about there is Peyton Anderson. He's a freshman attack, 6'3", 220. He is a problem to guard. And Chris, he has been critical in Syracuse's last 2 wins in this way. So they're down 5-1 against Virginia. Peyton Anderson, at the end of the first quarter of the Virginia game, just bowls his way through like 3 defenders and scores. It's 5-2. That lights a spark for Syracuse. They're down 3-0 to Notre Dame. Peyton Anderson says, get out of my way. I'm going to score. Bowls his way through a couple defenders again, lights the fuse, and that turned into a 9-0 run for Syracuse over Notre Dame. And the other thing is, to get real X and O on you for a minute. So usually Joey Spallina works from behind the cage. Now you can invert that. You can put Peyton Anderson behind the cage, let him run the offense a little bit. Joey Spallina can be in front of the net. And Joey Spallina spent the past 2 summers playing box lacrosse in Canada, which you have to be tight with your stick skills. You got to be great in front of the net, quick stick, kind of get the pass quick and score. By freeing up Spallina to work open in front of the net instead of having to charge from behind the net and score, much better for him. And he scored 4 goals that way against Notre Dame. So Peyton Anderson has been a huge addition, quite literally, for Syracuse lacrosse. And a good question from our guy Rock and Ron there. And I think that's all we have from our insiders this week. But you guys are always welcome to send us questions and comments for the podcast, things you want us to ask players and coaches, and just want to shoot the bull, talk Syracuse sports. We'd love for you to become a Syracuse Sports Insider today. Chris, any closing thoughts here as we head into Masters weekend and spring football weekend and everything that's coming up here?
Looking forward to the spring game. Make sure you pay syracuse.com and not Corrigan Sports, because better deal with us.
We'll make it more worth your while. Shameless plug, we will have a Friday pod with Javon Edmonds and I, where we're going to go a little more in depth into what to expect from the spring football game. So look out for that on Friday. Pod up now with ESPN's Jordan Reed on the NFL draft. And I mentioned I talked to a few different writers that covered Syracuse basketball's incoming transfer portal class. So look out for that. That's up now on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Full coverage of the Syracuse football spring game coming on our text line on syracuse.com. Social media, the whole thing. We got you covered on Saturday from the Dome. So we're looking forward to all of that. For now, for Chris Carlson, I'm Brent Axe. This has been another edition of Syracuse Sports Live. We will talk to you again soon, guys. Thanks for hanging today.